Today is brought to you by the Northwest Collaborative. We are made up of 5 partners, all working together, combining our unique specialisms to provide opportunities for innovative thinking and expert speakers, such as today's masterclass. The agenda, please, today is coming up on the next slide. I'm not going to run through this. I'll leave it up here while I just do this little bit of extra bit from me, and then we're going to get into the exciting bit of the agenda. But if you're here today, you'll probably know that social value isn't just a concept, it's a responsibility. It's about creating lasting, meaningful impact in our communities, in our workplaces, and across our supply chains. Regardless of the part of social value, whether it's inequality, growth, environmental sustainability, the collective actions of us all here together make a difference, and the mindset and the culture that we create to enable that to happen is absolutely critical. I am Social Value Strategy and Delivery SRO, so Senior Responsible Officer at MIA. And I know that my own organisation has a responsibility, but I know that events such as today have such a great impact in creating the collaboration and the energy, which is even more important to make greater change possible. So today you can see already you're going to hear from some great speakers. There's going to be an opportunity to share thoughts, challenges, insights, and hopefully develop some real change. It really is, as I say, a space for collaboration. So please engage, please type in the chat, ask questions. And over the next few hours, we'll look at how we can develop our social value mindsets and the cultures in our organisation. So without further ado, let's just get started. And I am really pleased to introduce Donna, who will take us through the first set of slides, and a little bit up to the break. We will have a very, very short comfort break after the first couple of slides. So Donna, welcome to today.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? You're always anxious when you start something off. So
I can.
Please, that's good. Everyone can see me and I can see my notes, so we're all ready to go. So thank you. My name's Donna. I'll go on to explain kind of my experience and why I'm here today. But I just want to take the kind of maybe the first 10-15 minutes just to share my thoughts on what social value is and what a social value mindset is, by speaking what I would call from the community lens, before I pass on to Michael, who talked through the policy lens, and then on to colleagues who will share more of the kind of practical lens. And what I want to do is introduce you to Health Creation Alliance, which is the organisation who's really helped me think my growth in this area since about 2020. And I've now got the privilege of being a non-exec director of. But I just want to echo Gail's points that there's greater knowledge and richness experience in the room. And I always start any of these conversations by saying the first message I give to senior leaders is walk humbly in this space. There's people who've been doing this for generations, much greater and better than the NHS. And so please do share your thoughts in the chat, and that we do have opportunities to kind of widen up the reflection, the discussion. I apologise in advance. I'm particularly talking from an NHS lens and mainly from an acute hospital. Just bear with me. We all bring baggage. That's mine. I own it. But there will hopefully be other colleagues in the call who can widen that. If you can keep your cameras on, I know we've been doing this for years now, but I still find it really hard talking without seeing faces. And if all I can see is tops of heads, I know you're all doing your emails, and I'll try and do something a bit different. Okay. So if we just jump on to the next slide. So I'm just going to offer my definition of social value. And I think I see things quite simply. It's just the positive impact an organisation can have on society beyond its financial bottom line and its way of being. So it encompasses, as Gail said, society, environmental and economic effects. But for me, sitting as a former exec director of a hospital, it's about how an NHS, it can be more than just a place for the sick. It's what else can the hospital do to tackle the underlying causes of health. And I don't want to steal Michael's thunder, who's going to talk about the policy lens, but it was the last paragraph in the 2019 long-term plan, although the phraseology has been around since the 80s. So I know there'll be people on the call who are more experienced than I to talk about what contributes to a healthy life, but the useless fact that I would say I'd been a board director for a good 10 years before I came across this fact was that if you think about what contributes to a healthy life, 5 to 10% are actually made up of because of the availability of and quality of health services, but 60 to 80% are due to the economic and social factors. So have you got something to do, so a job, someone to love or a sense of purpose and somewhere to live? And so really the social value for me is for the NHS is to think about how do we step into that wider space of the 60 to 80% in terms of or economic and social power. But the mindset bit is the manner in which this is done. And I would argue that the NHS and wider public sector leadership challenge is to fundamentally shift our leadership mindset away from our traditional approach of services and delivering service to a mindset much more around how do you create a social movement. So if you think you're on a seminar about the technicalities of social value procurement, I'm not your woman, but there may well be someone else in this room. So it's less about the technical space, but more about that kind of social movement. So flip to the next slide. So here's me hidden in the back with some other wonderful colleagues in the Health Creation Alliance. As I said, my career's predominantly been in the operational roles within the NHS, and I was exec director of 3 NHS organisations across the Northwest before I joined the Northern Care Alliance, which at that point was the group. So the NCA was a group of hospitals covering Salford Royal, elements of what was Pennine Acute in terms of Bury, Rochdale, Oldham, and it created a place-based organisational form. And it was the continuation of that narrative of integration of health and social care. So Salford was the vanguard for integration, and Rochdale's got a rich tapestry of history from the cooperative movement through to advanced service integration. So I was chief officer in Oldham and kind of had the opportunity to really think about what does it mean to be a place leader. So GM had the early devolved powers, as colleagues on the call we are aware of, and so really started to think about actually what does it mean to be the leader of a hospital in place? Is it of place? Are you in place? What's that relationship between ourselves and the communities? And in 2020, I was offered the opportunity to become the Director of Social Value Creation across the whole of the Northern Care Alliance to really take those thoughts further. And we created the NCA 5 pillars of the NCA Flourish, which is 5 pillars thinking of place, people, procurement, environment, and influence. And we had really clear ambitions around increasing local people into work, with specific focus on communities with barriers to employment, increasing local procurement and capital, and that was mixed in with kind of the operational duties around COVID. And I think it's probably, although that feels a long time ago, just to think back to that context of COVID, which is really significant when we really started to think about the stark reminder of structural inequalities for many people within our community. So to kind of, I put that in terms of context that a lot of my thinking was around during that period. So today I would now describe myself as a academic. So I moved out of NHS employment and I'm technically meant to be concentrating on my PhD, which is looking at the how to widen access to decent work within the NHS by thinking about how we recruit new colleagues, particularly those from non-traditional backgrounds. And it was about the 2020 that I first came across the Health Creation Alliance, who really have been instrumental in providing me with confidence. And I use that word purposefully because it is about having confidence in this space that we don't always get permission to do what we think is the right thing. And I know we're in the we were just talking before the call about planning guidance, landing and all of that. Thankfully, I don't have to read it these days, but it is thinking about how do you have the confidence to move into that 60 to 80% space of what creates a healthy life, even if it feels that your pressures are really around the immediacies of the day-to-day. So I'll just talk you through what the health creation is, and if we can just flip to the next slide. So health creation is the leading cross-sectional movement around creating, improving health and well-being and reducing health inequality. It's a membership-based organisation, but it's free. There's no application form. You just have to sign up to the newsletter. And it's made up of different sectors in terms of people with lived experience of poverty, discrimination and trauma. It's quite difficult to articulate or to do it justice in these few minutes. So at the end, I will put some links into some of the resources. And if there are members of the Health Creation Alliance on the call, please just introduce yourself in the chat so I know I've got some friends in the audience. And we're about to publish a blog by Marion, our chief exec, through the NHS provider, so colleagues might look out for that. So if we just flip to the next slide. So I'm not naive. I knew that I had a real privilege of being given the opportunity, both in my full-time NHS employment from about 2020 to 2025, and also now in terms of opportunities to kind of think academically about this. But I did spend nearly 30 years in the NHS, and so I kind of know from talking to colleagues that it feels at the minute that the NHS has kind of been ripped apart in 3 directions. So I guess for me, the first one, what I'm hearing is the extreme pressures One's a director of ops, always a director of ops, and the day-to-day pain when you're, particularly in January, both to the workforce and patients in terms of some of the extremities of pressures that we're seeing. Alongside that, there still is the political pressure to reduce deficits and reduce the length of waiting lists, so the financial and the access burden. But alongside that, we still are seeing the unrelenting demand to develop new models of care and to create functioning healthy neighbourhood services. But that is about a reworking of the relationship between communities and local partners. But I guess what I would argue that instead of locking ourselves into that almost paralysing paradigm of pressures that over-focus on treating avoidable ill health, rather than the avoiding ill health in the first place, if we look much more seriously at the causes of health and well-being. And that is growing interest in the policy, and I'm sure Michael will talk about that. But I just want to pull out a quote from the IPPR Commission on Health and Economic Prosperity, which says that our greatest assets. So better health will only be possible if we move from a sickness model of health policy to a health creation one. And it is in achieving that shift that should define the implementation of the new government's health mission. And that is kind of the direction of travel that for the last nearly 10 years, the health creation has been working with, by working with professionals from many sectors, community leaders and people with lived experience. The process by which people and communities gain a sense of their purpose, hope, mastery and control of their lives and their environments, when that happens, then health and well-being are enhanced. So if you look at through the community lens rather than through the service or policy lens, that picture starts to make sense. It is in talking to underserved communities that you really see that the common causes of many preventable illnesses and that imbalance of power. And communities are asking for respect and reciprocity as partners in prevention and creating their own health, but are typically not trusted to deliver when those in power see the systems and are overestimate our own roles in putting things right, which goes back to that point that I made at the beginning around walking humbly in this space. So I guess the anecdote for the starting point of those three pressures, or those competing paradigms, is really the anecdote to that disconnection is to connection. So if we move to the next slide, and this is the framework for health creation. This has been well researched and evaluated by 2 universities, and I can share that link. But it's about making sure that creating the conditions that people become better connected, both to themselves, to each others, and then to services and systems. And that enables people to increase their confidence. And we've got the 3 C's of health creation, which is connection, build confidence, take control. And it's the process by which people regain their collective and personal agency. And so this tested framework will not only enables health creation, but it's also a shift in that relation culture within organisations and across systems. And guided by this, local partners have redesigned mental health pathways, clinical outreach services to reduce Hep C amongst female street workers, and trusts to work with a range of minorities communities to enhance breast cancer outcome. It's also been used to shape the core 20+5 connector programme, and there's a piece on sustainability and system change which is about to be published. So I guess I kind of say that our collective task now is to create those conditions for communities to become stronger and more resilient, to help different parts of the system to embed creation as a way of working, and to develop courageous leaders at all levels and seniorities to create that conditions and system to remove those barriers. And for me, that is cultivating a social value mindset. I'm just conscious of time, so just flip to the next slide, which talks through the main activities. So there's an iVoice programme, which is a way of connecting senior leaders with people who have lived experience leaders. There's also a national and local movement, bespoke discovery programmes, which have been used by some ICSs, PCNs and services. And then there is the activities around publications and speaking at events, like I'm doing pretty badly here, having just clocked the time. So just the final slide is just the contact details, and I'll add to the link a couple of connections. And I'm now just going to hand over to Michael to follow this up through a policy lens, and then look forward to the better bit of this, which is the discussion bit. Okay, thank you. If I can hand over to Michael.
Thanks, Donna, and that was fantastic. And I think Really important to discern the technical and the strategic, isn't it, Donna? And the mindset piece there. And I will strongly echo if you're. There are many avenues to find out about the technical side of social value, but often technical without that mindset becomes a ceiling rather than a floor. And I think I really back what Donna's just said. Great to see you all, join you all from sunny Brighton. My name is Michael Wood. I work for the NHS Confederation, which is a membership body for NHS organisations. And I've worked in the health and the economy space for a number of years now. And I guess I've seen the value that we can bring from the health sector in economic and social terms. And I've also worked in trying to pull the NHS into some existing conversations. So brilliant to be with you today. And I'm going to start, just got a few slides. And hopefully what Donna and I do at the start is just sense that mindset piece, and then Becky and Dave and others will really complement it with quite some great examples on the ground. And I think that top down, bottom up is really important in trying to help us understand how really at the heart of this is balancing social movement with business as usual. I think that's how I always say. Social movement gets our leaders excited, doesn't necessarily lead to change. Business as usual, well, actually, if we're just trying to rewire quite a restrictive system, again, that's not going to lead to change. So hopefully today is a bit of that top down, bottom up. And my starting point, as always, actually, I love an iceberg image, because I think it reminds us that actually what we see, and we often see a piece of the world and think that's the whole world, don't we? And yet actually there's an awful lot of drivers. And 2025 now, we're in February, it's going to be a year of moving parts. And I think there'll be people on the call heavily involved in the work and health agenda. Really look forward to hearing how that's coming. There'll be people thinking about devolution. There'll be people looking at what's happening in neighbourhoods, a big NHS policy at the moment. There'll be wider colleagues from other local government or universities or colleges, for example, or VCSE organisations saying actually there's huge institutional instability. And there's something about actually understanding the how we're going to work through all these issues. And it's no one's job on this call to understand everything on this page. And I'm sure there's other bits that we could add to this page if we really put our minds together. But I think it's that understanding actually of how we need to work together as system leaders and understand how, there's some opportunities and challenges coming up. And so the reason this slide is there is just to remind ourselves there's quite a complicated world out there in terms of who we are, what we're working on, how we're working, with whom, for what reason. And that's just there. So let's keep that in our mind and maybe bring some of these issues through. This is about the how, not the what. So if we just move on, I just want to go back a year, really. And I know there's been lots of guidance coming out from the NHS recently. And sometimes I think we can pour through the guidance and try and understand what it is ministers want. Well, this was Wes Streeting a year ago in his first week in the job saying that actually the Department of Health and Social Care is an economic growth department, and that health sector is going to boost the economy. And it's really interesting. He's not the only Secretary of State to be making this statement. I mean, I think if there's any university colleagues on the call, they'll know that their Vice Chancellor received a letter in November, December from Bridget Phillipson saying, this is the amount of money you can raise tuition fees in a year. But actually, of the but she set out 5 priorities in response to that. One priority was about economic growth, show your economic impact. Another was about civic, show your civic impact. So actually, we are now having to be explicit about what we do for the economy, but we're not the only sector, and certainly public sector, trying to do this. So there's something about actually starting to understand what our collective view is. But the Department of Health and Social Care will be publishing details and explaining how they expect NHS England and Department of Health to be those engine rooms of growth. So what I would say is what you're doing on the ground is incredibly important, and we need to start telling that economic and social story. So if we just move on to the next slide. I think this is Donna's piece in a nutshell, and Donna, your PhD will be very useful for the first question. But when we talk about, we do lots of anchor work locally, and people say, well, what can we do? What can an anchor framework look like? And I say, well, first of all, let's just have a discussion about taking that mindset into what we do. And so I've just put down here 5 what if questions. Again, we could think of many more what if questions. And if we just go through these, what's interesting is, so if we know that NHS jobs actually often is a barrier to people working in our sector without an NHS experience, the question then becomes, what are you going to do about it? And I think that's what differentiates this from perhaps what will come down in the business planning or come down in other questions. Because actually the response to these questions here will differ depending on where you are in the system, where you are in the country, where you are in the economic cycles, and actually where you are even within the organization. And I think actually that tells us something about our value and how our value changes and what others want from us and what we can do to best effect. So sometimes I will do a board session where literally for 90 minutes, we'll just keep this one slide up and we'll just get people responding. And what's interesting, and Donna touched on what you say, the responses to this instinctively get you in a different place to where you started from. Because how often, I work in the NHS too, like Donna with a background in the NHS, how many of us have actually started discussing these questions and answered these questions in situ with our colleagues as we start developing strategy. So that's, I think, the mindset piece. And it's not for me to say what the answer to these should be. It's for you locally with your partners, understanding your communities to answer them. So these are just five example questions about employing people. What if we know young people have been the hardest hit, and they have, haven't they? Their support structures withdrawn as well as what they face. So what we're going to do for young people, again, it's not a typical NHS policy area, but it's something that's absolutely fundamental to what we do. Think about your high streets. We might come on to the health on the high street. Prioritising businesses as well as communities. What is your local industrial landscape look like? And actually, what do we know where do our staff live? Because it may well be that many of our own staff live in some of those communities which are most disadvantaged. We're supporting households, not just individuals. So for me, that's the mindset piece, which is, this is certainly not a ceiling. It's a floor on which we can experiment and have different discussions. So we're going to move on in the next slide and just break down. And we've got this purpose, haven't we? The purpose in green of every ICS system in the country has this purpose in green, which is fantastic because, if I come from an NHS, I'm used to talking about population health. I'm used to talking about inequalities. I'm used to talking about productivity and value for money. I'm very used to talking about that. I'm not used to talking about the bit in green, which is actually, for me, I like to term it's our step into the real world. So if I come from the NHS, that's the one I'm least experienced on. It's the one I least understand. It's the one I typically will struggle to explain to my NHS England colleagues how to show value. And yet for everyone on the call, not from the NHS, this is the gateway to a new conversation, isn't it? So I think there's something about actually sensing this and using and making this the link to everything we do and how we do it in a different context. And if we move on to the next slide, just people often say to me, well, this is, if anchors and social value is quite a bottom-up agenda, how do we add value at the different levels? And I think that's a great question to ask, because this isn't a top-down agenda. We want to start in the communities around the Northwest. I'm a Lancastrian originally, so the test to me will be what's happening in Clitheroe, where the system could add value to, rather than the other way around. And I think for me, if we take the people representing institutions on the call, Donna herself came from an institution, you have direct levers, don't you? Donna's mentioned, how you recruit, how you spend your money, how you stimulate. You have direct levers which you can pull, which can materially affect people locally. That's fantastic. That's a unique position. That is fantastic ability and power. Sometimes what institutions lack, however, is that understanding of the context in which they work. And that is where a system can come in, can't it? Because actually what a system can do, it can bring with it lots of institutional perspectives, and it can understand not so much what a system can do because its levers are more indirect, but I think a system's biggest challenge is to understand what it is it needs to change. So what needs to change in your economic and social context, which can best help communities? And then, of course, we can go back to our institutions and say, actually, this is where your value is to be led. So it's not just about an institution thinking how it recruits differently, because actually, if it does that, actually in by itself, it might actually skew labour markets rather than help them. Whereas a system can say, these are the big challenges facing our communities, facing our economy, with our leadership, and this is what we want to change, and then this is how across different sectors, and this is how to unlock that. So I just leave that there, because I think the big thing about social value mindset and about what we do is always having that thought about how we're adding value. And often adding value comes from the bottom up, doesn't it? So if we move on to the next slide, I've just listed some of the key challenges. And I like this slide because every time I do it, someone pops up and says, well, actually, there's another question here, or there's another area here. And that's the beauty of this. And what I would say is, for those familiar with, the sort of health and social care reforms, we've got 42 integrated care systems, and they've got an ICB function, typically the NHS brought together, and the ICP, the P for partnership. In my view, I think we've spent 2.5 years getting systems off the ground, and it's been quite tricky, understandably. The P bit has been too dormant for me, and if that doesn't reflect your experiences locally, I'm really curious into your experiences locally. For me, the importance of the reforms is getting our partnerships up and running, because our partnerships bring different sectors together, and they start looking at what it is it needs to change. So if you're in Lancashire now, what are the big challenges holding Lancashire back, and how can we get systems and partners focused on them? And any one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 areas, is it about stimulating new R&D answer? Is it about health and work? And health and work, I think, deserves a specific discussion actually at the moment. Is it about civic leadership and actually how we jointly invest finite resources? If every sector is struggling with money, how are we going to bring different funding pots together and influence how we each work? Is it about procurement? We can have quite a technical discussion, can't we, Donna, about procurement? Is it about estates? Apart from A&E, I need a health leader to tell me what they can't do on a high street in an empty Debenhams, etc. Is it about population health? And by that could be school readiness. We all know on the primary school gates, don't we? The sort of children and the families who we need to reach out to. And is it about net zero? And the net zero journey is going to be very different. If you're in Birmingham, the Black Country, that exists because of access to cheap fossil. That'd be a very different net zero journey to up there in Cumbria. So, and there's huge nuclear power in Cumbria. So there's something about asking the right questions. And we might, as we go through today, we'll hopefully ask questions and maybe answer some questions. Next slide, please. And I put this here just because, and this might raise a few chuckles from people on the call. We're all from different backgrounds. The big point for me about the mindset piece is our curiosity. When I ask non-NHS colleagues what they want from us, they want curiosity. They want the NHS to start asking questions. And also they want the NHS to know it's not just the money that they want from the NHS. Often it's our advocacy. ULEZ was a brilliant example in London. Is ULEZ a transport policy or a health policy? Well, actually, you could say it's both, but it was a clinical view of actually air quality on the streets around Euston, which supported that ULEZ policy. So there's something about our advocacy, seeing place leadership as an opportunity, pushing where and when the NHS where and when our partners need, and how the NHS will do that. I think the biggest quote for me was something which a VCC chief exec said to me, which was, the challenge for the NHS is it sees the answer to every question as a service. And I think for me, we've got to get away from that. And I think Donna gave a brilliant example for that. So if we just move on to the next slide. Well, I thought rather than go through some practical examples of what this looks like, because I'm conscious others will locally and they'll resonate because they're local. I thought, how can I drop in a few policy examples areas which are very big at the moment? And so work and health, 2.8 million people economically inactive because of ill health. I mean, we are an OECD outlier in the number of people not working now because of ill health. And it's an economic, a social, a political hot potato and priority. And what I've put here is just some of the funding coming into the health sector to tackle this. This does not include, and I've got numerous slides on the money coming into local government and combined authorities to tackle this. Many, many tens and hundreds of millions of pounds in the coming year. Now, the challenge I'm giving people when I speak to them is, are you simply waiting for your pot of money and you're going to develop a program? Workwell is a great example in Lancashire, South Cumbria, and try and get X number of people back working. Or are we going to take a step back and say, actually, what are the drivers of economic inactivity? What are the partnerships we need to do to make sure that young people in particular who are out of the labour market for anxiety and mental health, actually we are working to understand the issues, and we're working with schools, colleges, universities, as well as employers to get there. So there's something about which end of the telescope do we approach health and work through? Is it we've got £50,000, we'll spend a bit of money over here? Or is it actually across the Northwest, there's X £100 million coming in, a huge political pressure. What can we do to really start to understand system working? So that's a question I've been having in different parts of the country. The next slide will focus on devolution. So if the government wants mayors everywhere, if the government wants to complete the map, to quote on devolution terms, what does that mean for you on the ground where you are? You know, and the Northwest is an interesting place with a few mayors, a few non-mayors. Devolution is, you know, is a means to an end, not an end in itself. And it's really the art of system working. So if you think about strategic authorities coming through, taking over health policies and powers, well, actually, what does that look like? And what is our role in supporting that? If you've got the fourth purpose of an ICS, I mean, that is absolutely in the wheelhouse of a metro, of a mayor and a strategic authority. So there's something about devolution in local government in health and care. For me, it always felt like two trains leaving different stations at different times, actually. But now we're in the same, we're not only now in the same station, we're actually on the same platform looking at each other, thinking, hang on a minute, we are effectively facing the same way. We both want greater local autonomy to move the dial for citizen health and prosperity. And that is a fantastic ability to come together and do something. So what I will say in the coming year, I think there's going to be a huge push on how our systems in health and care work with our new mayors and our strategic authorities. And actually, it will be our voice in that, which helps understand what is possible. So I'll keep coming back to this issue. It's absolutely incredibly important. And the next slide is local growth plans. Another example of something that is part of the iceberg that some of you on the call will know about, some of you on the call won't know about, but it's coming. So this is a slide I've borrowed from London councils, and I've put my own green bubbles on there, because what we're going to see, all the mayors focusing on local growth plans as a way of stimulating their economy. And actually, the foundational elements of that economy are absolutely vital, aren't they? We all know that on the call. So here I've just put the classic 6 priority areas for London. Building on London's strengths as a global city, helping local economies thrive, delivering an inclusive economy, something like growth net zero, understandably, growing London's workforce and skills, and supporting high growth sectors, that'd be life science, etc. And what I've done around there is I've just put in a bit about, well, if I'm coming from the health and care sector, where's my interest in this? And I think wherever you are in the country, some form of economic local growth plan will be coming out, initially via the mayors, but others too. We need to keep putting that health and care voice and that public sector voice in these plans. Our economy depends on the link between health and prosperity. And so whether that's in supporting FE, reforming the levy, whether that's in social value procurement, whether that's actually about stimulating new R&D, good work agenda, key worker housing, we are all there. It's absolutely vital. And the next slide, which is again another issue, and I want to just come back to place. So Donna mentioned place and how vital it is, and I think there's a bit of danger that we see the policy agenda being quite top down, local government reform now, devolution, mayors coming up. What's happening at place? In the NHS, we've got integrated neighbourhood teams, but I'm really curious about the government's public service reform agenda. I think it's fascinating. Georgia Gold, who's got into ministerial position straight from leading London councils, and she did some amazing work. Google the work at Camden Council. It's culturally fantastic. And what's fascinating here is actually the government's looking at not supporting pilots, but testing and scaling good practice that already exists across public services in place. In the Northwest, I know there's been interest in Liverpool and Manchester, as well as over in Sheffield and down in Essex, particularly around family hubs. So that's the first port of call for this new public service reform vision, where there's a big innovation fund. They're looking to give money to local areas, and they're focusing on issues like family hubs. And this involves council-led, but involving local VCS organisations, other public sector agencies. And the government are trying to say, well, actually, this is amazing work that's been happening despite the system, not because of it. How can we upscale it? So keep a lookout for the Public Service Reform Innovation Fund. There's lots of interesting, innovative work. It will relate to the missions on the left-hand side. You'll have heard lots about the missions. Mission-based government is a different way of working. I don't think we've quite cracked it yet. But, what will missions look like in the Northwest, and who'll be leading on those missions? So that's just something there. That's the bottom-up part of this, which I think is really important. And I think for me, we're coming to the end of my slides. And these are just some questions I often ask. And I think for me, it's that mindset piece is asking the right question, isn't it? Part of the mindset piece is being curious. And I think for us, if we're still in the foothills of this journey, aren't we, Donna? I think going what you just said. So what should the next stage be? And I think just some questions which I often ask boards to reflect on, which is, do you have the appetite for change? Because in asking questions, you get, whether that's of communities, whether that's of ourselves, whether that's of other partners, you're going to get answers that you may not have expected. And actually, if you ask a question and you get an answer, people understandably expect you to do something, to change something because of it. So how will you respond to what you find, what that new mindset tells you, and how will you respond in policy terms, in process, in priorities? And really, how will you develop strategy that doesn't please someone in a darkened room in London, that actually survives first contact with communities? That's our biggest challenge, certainly in the NHS. And I've got some questions there, which we don't have to answer now, but I want you to be thinking about as we go through today. What is it you want to change and why? Who do you work with? Who do you don't work with? There might be people on the call that we don't work with. What is your USP in your place, in your institution, in your role? How are you going to do something different? If you know more now about the context, what you're going to do that's different? And I think that last question is really important. How does this change our system leadership approach? And what support do we need? What is it that actually we should be asking for in the leadership piece? So I'm going to leave it there and look forward to the rest of the discussion, really. And hopefully that triggers a few questions, a few thoughts, a few reflections. And Donna, we can take it from what people think.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So I know Michael left us with a few questions. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in to answer those. And just while we think about that, Alistair's put a question in the chat. So Alistair, I don't know if you want to come off mute, if that's possible, and just read out your questions, if that's all right.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I hope
Good morning,
you can hear
Alistair.
me. Hi, thank you for a really informative presentation so far. I think I was just reflecting, my role is a network in the Northwest, so we work across 3 NHS providers, but obviously we're developing services for the whole population. So definitely thinking about that system strategy and how we can affect the local economy as well in the Northwest. But we constantly see change and flux, not just within the organisations that our systems consist of, but also the leaders within them as well. And you can get to a really good place where you have some funding to do a project for a year or so, and then all of a sudden some risk is introduced because somebody has moved into a new role, or they've moved into a new role, or we've seen organisations merge, and all of a sudden priorities have changed, and that program or that project suddenly is not the priority anymore, or it can't have the sustainability or the effect that it should have. And I just wondered, how do we as leaders overcome that constant change and merge that's happening? And Michael, I know you talked about a number of innovations that are coming into the future, and we're sort of seeing that mayoral change, for example, in Lancashire and South Cumbria at the moment. So we've constantly got this flux, and I just wondered how we navigate that so that we can embed these changes for the long term, because I think everything that we're talking about probably needs more than 1 year to develop its economic and social change agendas. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. I think that's a really good question. If I start, and then I'll ask Michael to reflect, and then invite anyone else on the call. So I guess for me, most of the work that I've done has been really relational, and building relationships doesn't happen overnight. And you have doing that in a world that is constantly changing. What we can't do is make the world stand still, because it won't. So part of it is saying is that change will always be there, but there are, and anchors is an overused term, but there are anchors in the community that will still be there, even if. So if I look back on my career, there isn't a single NHS organisation in existence that I've been employed by, because they've all merged in the process that I've been there. So that is not going to change. So I think once you've got your head around that is always going to go ahead. But who are the anchors within the system or communities who are going to still be there? So let me give you a really practical example. So we did looking at in Oldham, the greatest economic inactivity was Bangladeshi Pakistani community. You could get short-term money, which is usually about 12 weeks. 12 weeks working with these group of women was that, but they weren't going to get job ready in that time. So we developed a series of relationships, particularly through the voluntary sector, community sector organisations, and identified who were the community leaders within that space. And they, in effect, held the legacy. So it wasn't an NHS legacy, it's a community legacy. And from that, we took different pots of funny monies to develop, but it was hosted by that community organisation. That community organisation is withering all of the NHS changes, has got a closer proximity to the community. And so rather than run employability programmes for the NHS from the hospital, they're run through the mosque, which is all of about 600 metres from the entrance to the hospital. But fundamentally, in shifting that and seeing that legacy piece of being through the community lens, rather than saying, well, it's an NHS, so we must put our service in, we flipped it round. I don't know if that helps, Alistair. So it's having that legacy piece always in your mind, but thinking about, I need to develop relationships for relationships' sake, and then the project will spin from there, and the legacy may be hosted away from some of your more traditional public sector organisations. I don't know. I've just now got to see your faces, and I've lost Alice's. I'll ask Michael to give his reflections, and then Alistair, come back to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Donna and Alistair. What a fantastic question. I think something about, first of all, realising that place leadership is permanent, isn't it? And by that we mean that different. It could be the success or otherwise of the economy. It would be the nexus. What determines often the thriving essence of a place is not any one anchor, it's how those anchors work with each other. So what we will often see if you take a 10-year period is either higher education or health and care or local government or voluntary sector under severe pressure. It's bound to happen, isn't it, in that cycle? That's one of the guarantees of life. There's something about how when one of those anchors is retreating, what are the others doing, and how do you lean on each other and support each other and challenge each other? But there's something about setting a culture of a place. And by this, I remember I was up in a northern city a few years ago, and it's quite a research intensive city. And what the council and the university and the NHS, what they started recruiting as a collective. So they would all first of all shared appointments, they would sit on each other's boards, and they started recruiting leaders who all had quite the same ethos. And what they were doing was really then knowing that was attracting a certain type of person, not into a chief exec position, but into the positions below, into the director positions. And they were almost changing the culture of that city away from one which had turned its back on local communities and others, and was now actually starting with an ethos. So there is something about you yourself can help determine the culture of a place, which can survive any one change in leader, because we all know leaders go. And the other point is, often the greatest change happens despite the system, not because of it, doesn't it? So that public service reform point, Alistair, do have a look at this agenda. Have a look at Camden Council, what they've done. Have a look at Gateshead Council. Gateshead Council have got some fantastic examples of how they've just empowered staff to do the right thing. So if it's a part of the budget, if we know, for example, that actually it's a bit of money needs to be spent on handrails outside someone's house to keep them safe, then they don't need to go through a business process. They just do it. They spend the money, they keep the receipt, and it's not in their area, but they know actually they'll be saving somewhere else across the line. And that innovative way of working has attracted other people. It's attracted national prominence now. It's almost despite the system, not because of it. So there's something about what's happening on the ground in great pockets where actually Donna's right. Where can you see some of this stuff? So what good stuff's happening despite the system, not because of it? How can you use a bit of leverage across your system? So it might be that actually responsibility for something might need to pass to a partner, to survive a rocky period, or because they're actually best placed to lead on it or best placed to get funding. The more you know about your system, the more you can start to use a bit of leverage to work it across. But this is going to be, Alistair, the biggest challenge we all face, but the opportunity of system working in a way that institutional working doesn't give us. And it's exciting actually too, I think, isn't it, Donna?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Joe's put a question in the chat. Joe, can I bring you in?
Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button there. Yeah, I suppose it's something that I'm really interested in, looking at that culture and trying to align people in their thinking. What we're seeing in the region I work in is that there's so many different subcultures within the different NHS organisations with their own cultural direction. And whilst in theory we all sign up to the same values and missions, etc., it can be quite challenging where there's some kind of issues going on as well. You know, it is not necessarily their number one priority, if that makes sense.
Certainly, Joe. I mean, I think when I saw your questions, kind of question where my mind went to is when you if you think, let me just, so it's in the middle of COVID, there was that first point where it looked like we we're going to get out of lockdown, and there was an opportunity with an FE college to say they could socially distance and they could create an opportunity for us to meet with some young people and give some career advice, because they had a massive room and we were just working through how to do it. So I put a call out just to say, I know everyone's really, really busy. Anyone want to just help me think through whether or not this is not possible? So this was just a general call out through staff networks, just a bit of anyone around. It was on Teams, and I had to stop Teams at 100 because I got 100 people on the call who someone had said to someone else, said to someone else. And this was like in the middle of, and I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. And it was people from all different departments, all different, because they said, this gave us the opportunity to remember, why do we come into the NHS? And what are actually we hear beyond that? And so quite often it's finding what is that hook to have that conversation. And yeah, we're all struggling for staff, but you know, and therefore to inspire the next generation. But that wasn't going to sort out who's going to do the shift tonight. That is, you know, you're talking the next generation, the approach. So it is about, for me, thinking about what is the narrative around what is your burning pressure at the moment, and how do you do that, see that pressure through a different mindset of what else can you get for that wider benefit and greater good. So I think it's, I don't know if that helps in terms of how this because there is so many different subcultures within the NHS. And I guess my final advice before I bring Dave in, because I've just seen your hand, Dave, is you go with the willing. If you've got a subculture that's on with this, is you start with your willing and see where that goes. And it's that curiosity. You might not have the endpoint in sight, but you go with the willing. Dave, can I bring you in?
Yeah. Just a quick response to Joe and Alistair, because thanks for. So I'm Dave Swin, I'm the Associate Director for Partnership Sustainability at Cheshire Merseyside. I'm going to be speaking with some colleagues shortly. You know, one of the, do you know what, as I'm looking into your eyes, Joe, and certainly as Alistair's, I can almost see the frustration. I can literally sense it. It's palatable in terms of you being very polite and professional. And I know you'd more than likely like to swear and curse and all the rest of it, because I can actually feel the tire kickers and the mood hoovers that you're dealing with in terms of we can't do that. Well, yeah, that kind of thing. And what I will say is, you know, I'm moving towards the kind of left hand of my career, but I've always had this in mind, is legacy, right? So as you go into work and you know the right thing, you know it's the right thing, right? And you know what you're doing is, you know when you're doing is right, and you're not going to bring everyone with you. It's as simple as that. But I always ask this question now, and I'm raising it on a regular basis. Legacy. What are you leaving when you've left your job, or you're at the end? What are you most proud of that you've done? And Joe and Alistair, if you wait for permission for that, your legacy isn't going to be as good as it should be. That's what I'm going to say. So part of it is, as leaders and emerging leaders, is having that bravery to just do stuff, have a go. You know, you're never gonna, nothing's gonna happen if we have this continuous leadership of like, you know, work within the boundaries, work within that set values. What Donna and Michael have just described is really difficult. It's really difficult, and it takes a certain person, a certain group of people to actually achieve those things. So, you know, I'm going to be less professional, ignore them, walk around them, go somewhere else, find other people. You know, if someone keeps saying no to you, just ta-ra, I'm not interested. I'm going to go somewhere else when someone says yes. And it's quite literally as simple as that. But think about your legacy, and everybody on this call, think about that. And it's a really poignant question. What am I going to leave? What difference have I made, and what am I going to do? And if you just tippy-tappy around the edges and stuff, you know, it's probably not, you know, as venturous as you should be. That's what I'm going to throw in.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Dave. Even I don't know why you got your Sunday name there, Dave. So I'm just looking at I've got a picture on the wall of my granny over there. My granny used to always say it's a lot easier to seek forgiveness than it is to ask permission. And I do think that's one of the biggest leadership lessons I learned in this space is, you know, have the courage, find a friend who may not be in the organisation, it may be through who's in a similar position, and if it feels right and you're not breaking any law, then crack on. Joe, do you want to come back in and see and help develop this reflection further?
Yeah, I just wanted to say how powerful that was, Dave. It really resonated with me. I'm a cancer survivor, so I've lived and breathed the system. I'm also a patient representative, so I use both of those within my work to help people see the value of what they do and try and get them to maybe stop being ground down by the pressures and say, do you know what, I make such a difference. So that legacy is something that I'm very, very passionate about. And I hope that when I come to the end of my career that I truly have made a difference. So thank you both.
Thank you, Joe. Michael, can I bring you in?
Yeah, and on Joe's point, and place. I think place gives us so much, doesn't it? Because, and this is, Joe, where often as people, particularly in the NHS, it's like, who we don't know what we don't know. And I think there's something about it. I call it civic leadership because it really matters to me. We are all, let's be honest, as public service leaders, we are all responsible for the success of our place, you know, and we all paid a price for, you know, so I think the high street is a fascinating one for me. It's like a petri dish, isn't it? So health on the high street for me, if I was sat here with a chief exec, I'd say, if your high street fails, you failed. Your place will fail, investment will dry up, people who can will leave, you know, and your opportunities of your kids will dry up, etc. So what are you going to do about it? And often they'll say, well, what do you mean? I can't do anything about it. Well, yes, you can actually. You are, you know, you are a leader of in this part of, you know, in this place. So there's something about challenging that, you know, getting people to realize that place is absolutely vital and their role in it is vital, and exposing them, Joe, to what they don't know. You know, how many of us in a hospital walk the streets around? How many of us actually know what our communities look like? And so I think there's something about using a bit of leverage, Joe. What is it that people don't know, and how can you expose them to new things that are happening? I love health on the high street. You know, I think we should be in every high street in the country, actually, as an economic agent. You know, and I think actually that you know, that is challenging the NHS to think, well, actually, we don't need to just provide everything in hospital. It challenges business to realize that actually health is a core part of, challenges local government to put us in there. But I think you've got to find an issue that's related to place and pushes that civic leadership button and just challenges people to realize that if their place fails, they failed. The two can't be separated. And place gives you everything because it's real, isn't it? You know, why have you chosen to live there? You know, start going back to that. But it is, and Dave's right, you'll find place excites people personally, so it should excite people professionally, and look for the people, as Dave has said, who want to make their place better.
Thank you, Michael. And I've just seen Gemma's put in a reminder that we need to also give ourselves some credit for seeing the good we do, and there is something about that in terms of how do we celebrate the success that we've got and the success that we bring in. Gabrielle, can I bring you in? You got your hand up.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much, Michael, Donna, all of you, because I've been contributing so much for the reflection, the work that we need to do going forward. So I'm Gabrielle. I'm a community outreach officer for over 1 decade. I work in Northwest London, but my background in Portugal, when I was born and raised, is different from the UK. And reflecting on my experience as a community outreach officer, I would like to stress how important it is, our approach to the higher streets, community assets. It is important, NHS, to have a wide vast of community assets which can improve, deliver, and even challenge our NHS approach. And what I experience on a daily basis is when I go into a shop, for example, Marks and Spencer, supermarkets, Tesco, why not having a pod there? If someone is doing their shopping, why not having a conversation? We do this in Northwest London. We go to Tesco, we go to IKEA. It's there. Is the commodity. They don't need to travel. They don't need to book appointments. Is a way of minimizing the impacts of the myth, I cannot get an appointment with my GP. But if we start a conversation through a community asset where people already are, makes it easier for them to be willing, okay, let me go to my GP because this nurse was really kind. She was available. She told me some things. Let me check with my GP. What we are trying to do here in Northwest London is just to approach communities and services. We don't need them to go to the surgery. We want to find them where they are on a daily basis. Churches, mosques, charities, libraries. Now we have different ports across our libraries because vulnerable people attend this center to do what? To read books, to read the newspapers. And if we are there, they come to us and we engage with them. We understand so we can take back to NHS what they really need to know about the real challenges. Just to give you some inputs about the outreach work that we do here. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you. That really is the community lens that I was trying to reflect. It's that the traditional approach is we need to put a service in, but do we need to listen to the communities about what is their concerns and where are they at? And it's that kind of power shifting in terms of how much of power do we give up or how much power do we see within those communities and those community organisations. Gail, do you want to come in and just give your reflections as you started off the session?
Oh, thanks, Donna, and thanks, Michael. And thanks everybody for contributing in the chat and all the thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I've just posted around the stories, and I'll just tell a little story to close before we have a little 10-minute break. But at MIA, we've got 110 staff, so fairly small, and we're a hosted service, so we're quite sort of autonomous a little bit. However, obviously impacted by everything that's going on in terms of the direction of travel and the NHS, and impacted by all of the NHS organisations in the Northwest. So feel like a little tiny boat bobbing on an ocean, and the super tankers of the trusts and on the ICBs and everything, so feel quite vulnerable to that. However, we've started where we are, and we've started with what our staff are passionate about. So we've listened to them about what they're already doing. And once we start magnifying and reflecting back to the whole of the 110, what a handful of staff are doing, you find more of these stories coming forward. So one thing we wanted to do was say, what are we already doing without building a new process in, without asking for some more information, without already overburdening our already time pressured staff? What can we gather? So as part of our declaration of interests, we gathered information, rightly so, around what our staff were doing outside of work, because that's obviously a really critical thing that people need to declare if they're doing that. And we were able to evidence that some of our staff, particularly those who work in the Liverpool City region, are spending collectively, our organisation is spending 50 hours a week of our own staff's own time supporting community, religious organisations, voluntary sector, sporting organisations. We would never have known about that had it not been for just looking at the data we already have and building that into the picture of what makes a difference to us and our staff. So it's possible to look at what you've already got. So don't always think about building something new and thinking about, oh goodness, this is a lot and we're going to have to do something different. Just think about what you've got and think about what your people are telling you. Anyway, 10:29, 1 minute before the half hour. So if we go for a 10-minute break now, and I really hope to see all of you back in 10 minutes. We've got a massively busy second half with Dave and all the team. So we've got, sorry, I just had a menopausal brain fog moment. Becky, obviously really key to this next presentation. Becky Jones, Dave Sweeney and Jennifer Hopes coming up next. So I will see you all back at 10:40. Thanks so much, Donna and Michael and everybody for contributing, and we'll see you at 10:40. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us back for this another really busy session. So we are really pleased to welcome a more practical look at some of the work that's been happening in Cheshire and Merseyside ICB, my own personal ICB. So I'm really pleased to welcome some people who I know a little bit of their work and can really say how much of an impact it's made on us at MIA. So Becky Jones, Dave Sweeney and Jennifer, who will be taking you through the next set of slides. And then we've got opportunity again for some discussion and some questions. So again, please continue to collaborate and encourage the conversations in the chat, and I will pick them up as we get into the open session, which will be around 11:10. So Dave, I think possibly over to you to introduce the team.
Thanks, Gail. And again, yeah, thanks, Gail. And again, just to introduce myself, I'm Dave Sweeney, I'm the Associate Director, Partnerships and Sustainability at Cheshire Merseyside ICB. And hopefully this session will just give you a bit of a guide, really, in terms of what we've tried to achieve in Cheshire Merseyside. Oh, and by the way, this isn't a big showing off exercise. There's nothing worse than people coming on and saying how good they are, and that. When we constantly play, do you remember we played top trumps? We played top trumps. Our deprivation is this, and we're worse than this, or we're better at that. This is not anything about that. This is just really from the pocket rocket that is Becky Jones, and who works in my team, exceptional, and resistance is futile, is what I would say. You'll get to see how kind of Becky has pushed herself and driven herself in terms of. There is no escape. You either get back to her or she just stalks to the end of the world. It's fantastic, and it works really well. And we've been working with Jennifer Holtz, the program manager from Aqua. We did some collaboration together to make sure that we spread the kind of word in terms of what we're trying to do, and make sure that connectivity. And Jennifer was really good in offering some challenge and some critique from Aqua to make sure that we were kind of deriving the message as much as and giving that message out as much as humanly possible. So I'm gonna hand over to Becky now to just give you an oversight of what we tried to do, and then Jenny will join Becky. What I'll do, I'll just sum up at the end. So Becky, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. So I'm Becky Jones, so MAA Associate, working to advise the Cheshire Merseyside ICB on all the important things, sort of social value, sustainability, and just putting people first, and trying to have that longevity of services and planet, really. Can I ask for the next slide, please? Thank you, and the next one. Thanks very much. So I just wanted to start off, because I'm conscious not everybody is from Cheshire Merseyside or knows the area. So Cheshire Merseyside ICS is the second biggest ICS in the country. It's absolutely massive. Nearly 3 million people are served across 9 different places. Can you just go back, please? Thank you very much. We've currently got 17 providers, but that started off as 19. And as time's going on, they're starting to come together and work together. We've got all kinds of primary care facilities that we work with. And a really, really, really important part, as well as obviously local authorities, is the VCFSE sector, so the voluntary community, faith and social enterprise. And as I talk through these next few slides, I think you'll really see the importance that we have on working with the VCFSE sector to understand the needs of the local communities, whether they're patients or customers or clients, however you refer to them. They're the same people, and we need to understand what they want in order to then use that to define the services that we then deliver. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the things I really want to stress, like social value is a bit of a buzzword recently. Everyone kind of wants to, jump hashtag social value, this, that, and the other. And I think if you want it to be really successful, like so, you have to look at it first of all, and it's like I know Donna's mentioned it, and it's a real bugbear of mine. Like, social value is not procurement. It's so annoying and so frustrating. It's about understanding what people want, listening to them, doing it, and then delivering the services that people need, and like I say, creating that social movement. That's social value in action. And what we did in Cheshire Merseyside, starting off, and this has taken a long time, so we're into the 7th year of creating this now. So if you want to jump on here and create something quick in 3 months, then you've come to the wrong place, because on the surface of it, it'll look great, but it'll all collapse underneath you, because you need that social interaction, you need to speak to communities, you need to co-produce things, and you need to embed it over the really long term. So what we did, sort of starting in 2018, when Cheshire Merseyside became a social value accelerator site, was working with the VCFSE sector and co-producing with members of the community. We did something called a recipe for a good life, where we spoke to people and said, what does a good life look like to you? And based on that, we created the Social Value Charter. And it's just a series of principles and commitments that says, as an organisation, as a system working together, these are the things that we want to do in order to deliver the services that the people of Cheshire and Merseyside need and require. Moving on from that, we then created the Social Value Award with an organisation called the Social Value Business. And what that is, it's really, really simple. It has 5 themes: social, economic, environmental, growth and innovation, maximum 300 words. And it asks you to say, how are you delivering social value across these themes in Cheshire and Merseyside? And it's made really simple so that whether you're a massive multi-million-pound company or whether you're a small one-person band, you can still answer the questions and you can still get involved and you can still demonstrate how you're delivering social value across Cheshire and Merseyside. And people say, well, we're a multinational company, we're based in wherever. If you're working and delivering services in Cheshire and Merseyside, you can still demonstrate the work that you're doing in Cheshire and Merseyside. And we've now got, it says 83, but we're closer to 100 on both of these. Now, we've got it as a bit of a mission to get everything up to 100 so that we can really demonstrate that this is, that if you're not signed up to these, you're the ones that stand out rather than the other way around. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then what we did was, because we're really conscious, everyone talks about the financial pressures. I'd started working in local government about 20 odd years ago, and I was having the same conversations in local government then as I'm having in the NHS now. And it's about, if you keep doing the same things, you're just not going to make a difference. And it's all, but we've got these financial pressures, we've got these issues, we've got these challenges, we've got all these ambulances queuing up at the doors. Well, that's not your problem. Your problem is that why are people going into hospitals? Why aren't we dealing with the communities? Why aren't we helping people to help themselves? Why aren't we focusing on prevention? Those are the issues. That will stop your ambulances, not focusing on getting ambulances out quicker. And these are the things we need to think about. But what we also are sort of relevant about is the pressures on colleagues, finances and procurement, and people that have to make those decisions when you're faced with, you have to stop, you're overspending, you need to do this. And so what we need to do is say, the work that we're doing is making a difference. And so what we did was we decided to come up to show that baseline. We worked with the Social Value Portal and we created a system-wide set of TOMs, so themes, outcomes and measures. Now, we're the only ICS in the country to have done this. And what we did, again, we co-produced with all across colleagues all across Cheshire and Merseyside, and we came up with this set of TOMs across, again, the different themes. So we've got 9 organisations set up at the moment, but we want to extend it further, and there are other organisations who work with the portal and we can access their work. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to do this kind of stuff, working across that patch. And we didn't just work across the NHS. You can see we worked across public sector, private sector, voluntary sector, and it was really difficult. And we had some really difficult conversations because people would say, well, why should I have to do this? Social value versus social impact. There was lots and lots of discussions, and gathering data is really hard, especially at the ICB at the time. The ICB had just come into being, kind of all of the memory had gone, lots of the data had gone because people had moved on. So it was really difficult to how do you pull all of that together? So working with colleagues who were able to bring in an embedded resource, that really helped, because now what we're able to do is pull that information together and we're able to say, well, people say, oh, this all sounds really lovely, it all sounds really lovely, but so what? So what? When we're dealing with all these challenges, so what? And actually what this work does is it allows us to answer the so what, and it allows us to put those pounds and percentages, which aren't the most important things about social value, but when you're trying to get to the exec level and you're trying to get that senior support, they really do help. So if I can just ask for the next slide, please. Thank you. And what we've been able to do is by putting that information, can I just pick up on the slides? They're not my notes, that's just the information on the slides, just if people are concerned. I haven't got any notes for my slides. But just for this next one, so what this does is this really puts that measure. So, people like us who are engaged, people like us, we understand working with the communities is really important. But as you'll know, it's always leisure service, community services. Whenever we have to make tough decisions, those are the ones that they go first. And so by being able to say, actually, because we've done this work, we've been able to deliver just shy of £100 million worth of social value across Cheshire and Merseyside. And that's just with those organisations that have signed up, and that's just scratching the surface. Like I said, I know from an ICB perspective, we've got about 35 million, but I know we can double that when we can find where the data is hidden, and we just need to be able to evidence that and access it. And that's really important, because then when people say, so what, this is the so what, this matters. And this is a really important part of being able to embed it and demonstrate the difference. Next slide, please. Thank you. And one of the really important things, what I've learned from working in this agenda in particular, is the importance of listening to people who have got different voices and working with them. And sometimes you might say, actually, you know, I'm listening, but I don't agree. But with this, what we had was when we worked to come up with the TOMs, we had colleagues in the VCFSE sector that said, actually, why should we be doing this? Everything that we do is inherently social value. You know, what we do is a social impact, and you can't measure social impact in the way that you measure social value. And these are all really valid points and really valid discussions. And so what we did was, again, we worked with the social value portal and we carried out a report that really just looked at how does social value in the VCFSE sector matter? How is it different? And what we came up with, and again, it's something that Donna mentioned earlier, was about, as organisations, we don't just deliver social value, we receive social value. And that's a really important part. And there was a really, you know, we really engaged with our VCFSE colleagues on this, and it helped us to really, you know, understand and to embed this. And I'm going to touch on our anchor work in a minute, but just the importance of listening to people, working with people, understanding. We published a report, it's all out there, you can Google it. But that really showed that, you know, the value of listening to people and then getting them on side. And like I said, this took a long time. It wasn't a 5-minute thing. But then we can move on to the next slide, please. The importance then of getting people to work with you as you go through this process. So we're like on our 7th year. So if I pick up on the anchor, so say we started with social value, we started to move that with the TOMs to develop it. And then we also had our anchor framework. And what this was it was an 18-month process that we undertook where, and this is again, it was at the height of COVID. To be quite frank, we were told to stop it, get off this work, go and work on the COVID stuff. And Dave said to us, carry on, do what you're doing. And you know what, and it was really good because the people who we were focusing on to get the benefits were the people who were really impacted by COVID. So it was really good that we took this. So we then say we engage with professional colleagues, we engage with members of the public, we use the voluntary sector to go out and speak, you know, directly to people in the same way that we did with the Recipe for a Good Life. And we came up with a series of principles and priorities, which I'll touch on in a minute. And then what we did was we launched that on the 12th of July in 2022, which you'll remember was when the ICBs first came into existence. It was in the first couple of weeks, and it was signed by the chair and the chief exec of the ICB. And I think that just really demonstrates the importance of having senior level buy-in and the importance of social value at the start of this whole new creation of this way of working. And what we wanted to do, because we've got our social value work, Cheshire Merseyside is also a Marmot site. So what we weren't saying is, right, stop all of that and do this. What we've created is a framework. And it's a framework that organisations have signed up to, and they've agreed on those commitments and those principles. But if you are a private sector company, you're going to do something different to a district council, who will do something different to a city region, who will do something different to a small voluntary sector organisation. So what it is all work together on this overarching commitment, but you do it in a way that works properly for you. And from doing this and this process, we've got, I think we've got about 33 organisations signed up now, and our aim is to get to 50. That's our big focus. And we're going to be doing a webinar later on in the year where we're going to really focus on the importance of this and how, you know, the impact of 50 organisations signing up to it can be. And then what we said was, well, actually, we've got people signed up to this and this is great, but what next? So we came up with the idea of the anchor assemblies, and these are supported and chaired by the chair of the ICB. And we say, so you've signed up, you've committed to these commitments. 1 year on, where are you against them? So we designed like a measurement framework. And again, we went out to the local communities to see how would we best design this to get the best outcomes for you. And we've now got this this database that we're collecting, and it's great. And yes, it's a way of holding people to account, but more importantly, it's a way of showcasing all the great work that people are doing. So we can put that on the website. We can put people into into connect with each other, and it's a really, really, really positive thing. You know, when everything is doom and gloom, it allows us a chance to really showcase all the great work that is happening. Because you know, when you work in the public sector, you're useless, you're lazy, you're rubbish, you don't do anything. Whereas this actually gives us the opportunity to demonstrate all the great work that actually is happening, and then align it to being able to demonstrate the difference that makes. And then we're also, we've now got returning anchors. So once you've been on there for a year, we ask you to come back and we say, so this is what your data was last year. This is where your data is now. And we're working with Claire, so the Centre for Local Economic Studies, and it's aligning with the Living Well programme. And we're able to say, through the lens of employment, by signing up to this process, by all those organisations doing this, what difference is it making across Cheshire and Merseyside, particularly to the poorest communities, particularly to prevention and reducing health inequalities agenda? And what we've been able to demonstrate is some, and I haven't got the slides to show you because they haven't quite finished it yet, but we've got, again, some insanely good data. And just to say, I'm really not a data person, but I understand the importance of that data. And we showed it as like a draft discussion, and we had some colleagues from the ICB. And as a result of that conversation, we are now really a part of the process of the 10-year plan and process that's happening for Cheshire Merseyside. So social value and sustainability principles and priorities are firmly embedded at the start of that discussion because of this work. And I think that's just really important. And it's also brought some really important discussions. You know, I'll show you in a minute, but one of the requirements is to pay a real living wage. We've had some really difficult conversations because organisations can't afford to pay a real living wage. But the flip is you can't not afford to. So how do we make that happen? And if one organisation can do it, then another organisation should follow that process. And also around the VCFSE sector, if you're only giving out 12-month contracts and expecting there to be some sustainability and social value, well, then that's wrong. So we need to look at those kind of contracts. And all these things have been brought to the ICB for conversation because they've been raised through this process. Now, I'm not saying it's been easy, and I'm not saying that, we haven't had issues, because we have, but I think we've got through it, and we've just keep the focus of all times is to focus on the local communities and what do we need to do for local communities and people within that, within Cheshire and Merseyside who are serving those near 3 million people. And if we can get that right, then we can really make a difference for those people which we serve. Next slide, please. And then I think it's on to Jen. Oh, no, sorry, it's just me. So this is just our principles and priorities here. Sorry, so you can see the commitment to the real living wage, which is so important. And something that Gabrielle picked up earlier on about using like the mosques and the libraries. We ask people, how do you use your buildings? How do you make the most of what you've got there for the public good? And we ask people to demonstrate this. And it's, working with partners. And we also ask people, to sign up to the prevention pledge that we have, to sign up to our social value charter and our social value award. So it's nothing new, it's nothing extra. It's just asking people to sign up and do the best things that we need to get the best outcomes for our people. And I think it is now on to Jen. So I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Becky. I'm challenged with the sun, but it's something that only happens at this time of year and occasionally comes out in Rochdale, so I shouldn't really complain, but I have to kind of keep moving around to dodge it. It's lovely to see everybody here. So just to kind of carry on from Dave and Becky, we were delighted within Aqua to be asked to work alongside Dave and Becky and team, who were really keen to take some of the work they've already done on anchor working social value in the region and look for even greater opportunity to connect different leaders and to find other organisations who have this work at their heart. So on the screen, you can see a very simple anchor framework that we designed the inner circle parts with Donna and team actually in Greater Manchester, who were interested in working with local authorities and NHS to understand what's already going on and where can we learn from each other and address gaps in the work that we're already doing around social value. And then when we kind of connected with Becky and Dave, obviously Becky's described their fantastic social value anchor framework within the region. And Becky had done a great job of kind of mapping some of the key strategic policy and direction to, within that. And we were able to map that really nicely, as you can see here within this framework, to show that there's a range of initiatives that we're already being asked to do and doing really well that help us deliver on anchors and social value. And that combined with the kind of leadership that people have described, that kind of that will to try and challenge what we normally do and go further. It's kind of the key essence of the anchor and social value approach that we took. So within Cheshire and Mersey, really keen, as I mentioned, to identify opportunity that's wider, especially outside the NHS, within organisations in Cheshire and Mersey who have that anchor and social value approach. And they're really keen to connect different system leaders. So people have mentioned there's a lot of work already ongoing in different geographies in different parts of Cheshire and different parts of Merseyside, and people leading on different programmes of work. And we brought them purposely together to look at some of that synergy, to find the best practice and identify opportunities to go a little bit further. So next slide, please. And this also very, very simple diagram was kind of a summary of a number of conversations across the NHS, across public health, local authority, voluntary organisations, a kind of way of envisaging what we do day to day around social value and anchors. So I think I quite like that phrase, that an anchor is something that's well rooted in place, an organisation that's essence is in that place. And hospitals have got a major aspect of anchor and social value, as do local authorities. You know, you're not the local authority of Knowsley if you're not in Knowsley, are you? Equally, there's a wide range of private and charitable organisations and other organisations working in the sector who are in essence part of that place. And we were kind of keen to try and understand and reach out to them. And then the social value, the stuff is kind of like the mechanisms and activities that we undertake within organisations, with our communities, that deliver some of that that focus on the wider social determinants of health and in some of those elements of the framework that I described previously. And then I think Michael earlier mentioned kind of the importance of partnerships. So we all meet, don't we, in different multi-organisation groups. And those partnerships are really important in kind of embedding that anchor approach within individual areas and the social value work we do, both in the locality and in the system. So next slide, please. So as an outcome of the work that we did then, I'm sorry that this looks a little bit small on the version that's come around. We, as I mentioned, brought together different system leaders, and we reached out to a lot of different organisations. And the kind of common themes that we found in Cheshire Merseyside was that the maturity in terms of people's organisational approach to anchors and social value really varied. And what we found was there's a strong parallel. An organisation that had a culture and a mindset to really proactively focus on social value improvement, they were better able to articulate the work they were doing, and it was often very strongly driven by a particular leader. So it's that aspect of the leadership again. Certain people within an organisation, maybe at director level, could be any other level of organisation, really making a purposeful attempt to champion it was the biggest single impact that an organisation can have. It was really then digging deeper and challenging the usual ways of working and making sure that social value was at the front of the organisation. We also found something that's, I don't think will come as a surprise, but organisations outside the NHS and often outside local authorities are much better at articulating their social value. So charities in particular, housing associations are a great example. They have a particular statutory duty to provide housing, but beyond that, they're working with very vulnerable people, often people with a wide range of health and care needs, and they're much better able to articulate what they're doing to respond to that need. In the NHS and local authorities, I think we're a bit more governed, aren't we, by that statutory guidance, and it's easy to use that as an excuse not to kind of dig deeper into ways to work more widely with communities. I found that measuring impact of social value, as Becky alluded to, isn't always easy, although the framework's a really good guide to do that. There's lots of stuff happening. We don't always bring it together. We aren't always able to articulate what difference it's making, even despite having contract mechanisms such as Tom's in place. And that people found that we don't want to be too constrained by lots of rigid measurement frameworks, but a framework such as the one that Cheshire Mersey are using was useful as a way of benchmarking what people are doing against some kind of national criteria, but it wasn't too rigid. And then what we found as well, there's a real kind of difference between that kind of strategic intent around social value that an organisation can articulate sometimes, and what goes on the ground, the real people who are doing it. So what's great is when you reach out to people, again, in voluntary sector organisations, in particular, housing associations, chambers of commerce, who can describe all the fantastic work that they are doing. And yet that somehow doesn't always kind of isn't always visible, is it? It's something you find out about this great person who's doing that great work because it's important to them and that's their value. And we don't always capture that. We don't always harness that intelligence. And I guess working in partnerships is a real way to bring kind of those organisations into that conversation more widely. But notwithstanding, again, this came up earlier, there are lots of constraints, and that particular element where people feel that the funding deficit means that we're most likely to cut the things that add the social value. They're the easiest things to drop for the preventative measures. And again, it's having to be really purposeful at a really challenging time, isn't it, to try and hold on to that. And then the final slide from me, next slide. So obviously part of what we were trying to do within Cheshire Mersey was reach out to other organisations outside of the classic local authority and NHS. And we were able to kind of, through that work, reach into our colleagues within the region to kind of make connections with a lot of other organisations who are anchors in essence and whose work is focused on social value. The examples on the right-hand side there. And many of them do great work and are really keen to collect with the public sector, I think. And then some of the kind of key summaries of what we found, yeah, it was really helpful. I think people found it really useful to come together as a region to create a joined up vision that Becky described, and to be more to be able to impact evidence what they're doing. Thought they can never do enough of this kind of conversation. You can never talk about this enough. Every opportunity to talk about what we're doing in social value and challenging the way we're doing it is really beneficial, because it creates that culture and that way of working. It's not a project, it's a way of working. And this time, webinars like this are really useful, again, in kind of developing us as leaders in social value. We found that awareness of the Anchor Assembly that Becky talked about really varied, despite the fact it's kind of well known and been really well promoted in the region. I know since then you've kind of gone back out to a lot of other organisations, increased that awareness yet further, and people really want to share and connect on the work they're doing and inspire each other. And then obviously, as Becky's mentioned a few times in her presentation, it's a real journey, isn't it? It's not an instant overnight thing. It's something that's quite gradual. And people described it were quite useful to think about using that framework to think about, whereas an organisation on that journey, perhaps you're just starting out, perhaps you're really thriving, and to have tiered levels of awards so you can kind of strive for the next step, strive for excellence. So I'll pass back to Becky now.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. So just finally for me, I think when we talk about this kind of area, it's really easy to throw out what all the problems are and what all the challenges are. But actually, it's not so easy to say how we can deal with those and put the solutions in place. And so that's what we've been doing. So, and apologies again, the writing's really small on this version, so I'm struggling to see it. But one of the key things is those links with the key areas of the ICB and the wider system. So finance, procurement, estates, and public health. When we first started this work, those links weren't that strong for lots of reasons. Obviously, it was a new system coming together, different people getting into position, everyone dealing with their own kind of number one kind of priorities for them. But what we've done over the last couple of years is really focus and make a real attempt to build those together. And now we're doing that. And that's why we're able to demonstrate our figures, because we've got those close relationships with procurement, which weren't there. We've got finance now. So when finance are being asked to make those decisions, we're asking them to consider the sustainable impacts as well as the financial impacts. From an estates perspective as well, we had an estate strategy that wasn't aligned to the green plan. Now it is being aligned to the green plan. So all of these things, and we're working much closer with public health so we can understand the interlinkages between the two areas. And it's really easy to say, it's really difficult to make happen, but we are doing that across the system. And again, it's having that, just as, again, to say social value is about listening to people and giving people a voice and delivering the services that people need and helping people to help themselves. The NHS and all of, the public sector, it's not there to make people better. It should be there to keep people well and help people to live the best life to the way that they can do. And one of the really important things that Dave and I are super focused on is, anyone can call yourself an anchor organisation. That's fine. You can just be the anchored in your organisation. But to call yourself a Cheshire Merseyside anchor organisation, we want people to have to sign up and commit to the commitments that we've got. So that's something that we're working with the ICB and the HCP, the Healthcare Partnership, on to make that happen. And it's always about, and everyone said this before, health is like rocking out. 20 years ago, I was having these conversations in local government. They were called something different then, but it's the same kind of conversations. And health is so far behind, and we need to learn. The private sector, it's not a bad word. It's not a dirty word. They're doing some amazing things. Let's learn from it. Let's harness it, and let's put it into place to help the people that we're all serving. How can we work together? How can we learn from things that's happening? How can we work together better to purchase our energy, to deliver our energy, to make savings? All these kind of things are really important that we need to do working as a system. Working with the local authorities, working with the voluntary sector, and listening to people and doing things that we need to make a difference for the long-term longevity of the communities, of the NHS, and of the planet in general. So I think that's it for me. And back on to Dave, I think. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Jen. And it's always good for me to sit back and kind of listen to that journey, because every day, since I feel like I've been at this for such a long time, and some of the key components in there are, you've got to manage your managers, and in terms of there's lots of there's been lots of discussion this morning about leadership and about the priority and where this sits in the priority, and that will wane. That will there'll be individuals in who are really into this kind of thing, and that, you know, sometimes in organizations they're not. But there's a couple of tips from me, I think, from all this. You've got to prove the so what. There are people who will take a punt because it feels right, and there are people who will only take a punt when the data suggests that it's worth a punt. Right, so you've got to get a really nice mixture of that, and it is really doable. It's really doable. Now, the difficulty you've got, like, for example, if you're speaking to one of your DOFs, so your directors of finance, and we've just articulated, you know, the 94 million and the 35 million, but the DOF will never see that on the bottom right-hand corner of their budget list, on their budget, you know, in terms of where they're trying to find savings. But from a board perspective, what it's really good to understand is that each organisation is doing more than it's probably that's in its, you know, that it's in its eyesight than they could ever imagine. So regardless of your contract size, regardless of the size of your organisation, it's so important for you to demonstrate that just you being an organisation is attributing to good health, good social value, putting back into the economy, everything that kind of Michael said around the, you know, around the high street and various other things, you're contributing to that. And another tip is that there will be, I call them ambassadors or advocates or just cool people that are in your organisation. Seek them out. So we have two in particular who work on our green plan and our green agenda, as well as social value. One is someone who's Gideon Bentovin, who's connected right in the heart of the city region, right at the seat of the mayor in Liverpool and Merseyside, and a well-known advocate, almost kind of David Attenborough-esque, but he's got a lot of clout and he's got a lot of networks and he's got a lot of connectivity. So we asked Gideon to be our ambassador. So he's now called, quite likes that title, our Green Ambassador. And it works extremely well. Isla Wilson is the chair of Cheshire Wirral Partnership, a huge mental health trust in Cheshire. And she's got a background, a big background in social value and in economic development. And Isla's our social value ambassador. So when I go to board or when I go to update, I've got two very influential individuals at the side of me who can, you know, you can populate that discussion and get that, you know, and push that discussion. And I will guarantee 1,000,000% they're either a non-exec directive or there's someone in your organisation with that connectivity who will be more than happy to jump and to, you know, to on the back of this. So when you're getting a board, when the board realises that and those influential people that can make change realise what is achievable and what you can actually do with this work, it changes the conversation, it changes that cultural mindset. And I keep saying this, and you know, and people laugh at me, but we need to be a little bit more Oprah Winfrey. And I keep saying that name. We need to be a bit more, you know, we'll learn from our American cousins and bloody show off a bit more than we do. You know, it's very tea and biscuits over here, and it's, well, we don't want to shine, you know, we don't want to shine a light on this too much just in case. I completely disagree. There's some fantastic work that's going on. And just from the chat, each and every one of you are doing some fantastic stuff. And we'll all be in different places in terms of that. But shout about it. Tell people what it is and bring your community in to showcase what difference that's made. I think I'm kind of, God knows, I wouldn't like to say how long I'm into this. But there's still so much to do. And not, you know, we've never lost our focus on that. And again, just going back to Jen's point, we're good mates, but we didn't start off as good mates because what Jen was tasked to do by others in the organisation was test the mettle of what we're doing. So you can either take that personally, or you could take it as a positive critique. And you know, sometimes as individuals we go, oh, you know, why are they asking questions, or you know, where are you challenging? Embrace that challenge, embrace that critique, and develop and move on. And before you know it, you know, what you've got then is even more strength to your armory, even more strength to what you're trying to do. Because it's really important to get that, you know, get that sign up. But there's nothing more powerful than the community voice. And what we can demonstrate throughout this is that it's not us saying this, it's not academics, it's not people who are paid to do this people work, it's people that on the street that are telling us this would be ideal, this would be fantastic. Can we be involved in this? And that's where your real power lies. So I'm probably going to stop there, if that's okay. And if there are any questions, I'm sure we'd be more than happy to try and answer between us.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you to the team as well. Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Jen. Does anybody have any specific questions for any of the team? You can obviously put your hand up and come off mute if you'd want to ask a specific question, or you can type it in the chat if you're feeling a little shy. But as Dave said, never be shy, shout about it.
I think Gabriella's come into the chat with a comment. If she wants to come off mic, Gail.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. I did just see your face, Gabriella, before, so I know you're on my top screen.
So just to share that at the moment we need more community champions. And why is that? Because the value that they bring to any project that NHS intends to deliver, they can bring inputs from the ground to the upper level, because quite often we bring from the upper level to the community. And what we just heard, we need to review this. But the thing is, not many charities or community assets have the opportunity to come to the round table and share their expertise. So what we need to make sure is we invite them to the table. We encourage them to join us, to bring their voices, their expertise, so NHS has a solid knowledge about what is on the ground. To give you just an experience, at the moment, with two more colleagues, I'm co-chairing the vaccination steering group with NHS England. We are volunteers. We are for the Portuguese speakers, because I'm a Portuguese speaker. And we have for Bangladeshis, Black African Caribbean. Do we have similar groups across the country where we can speak the same language and address how our community feel when it comes to immunization, when it comes to health, to screening? So if we have small groups who share the same culture, the same language, the voice becomes bigger. And what I encourage is community champions. Yes, yes, yes. They are the base for any powerful and impactful work that we want to deliver in our communities. This is my view. Thank you.
I'd just say yes, yes, yes. You know, and well, you're spot on. I mean, as always, you're absolutely spot on. You know, and I think it's easy to sit here and we get paid. You know, we get paid to do a job, and it's really easy to kind of get. Lazy is not the word, but kind of less focused on, more focused on the report rather than the actual content of the report and the kind of the consistency of it. So, you know, we'd be always looking for kind of expertise like yourself, Gabriella, in terms of in defining that. And, you know, Cheshire Merseyside, more so in Merseyside, it's such a multicultural kind of place. It's a fantastic. I live on the dock in Liverpool. I'm really lucky. And although I'm not a Scouser, I'm a Woollyback, as I'm reminded on a regular basis. It's fantastic. But we, you know, as when we're doing this, we probably haven't tapped into as much as we should. Well, what we have is an open door and an open conversation to whoever wants to be part of that. And we're a really small team. There's myself, Becky, and Mandy, and we like to think that we punch above our weight. But there's so much more we could do. But it's not about the teams as well. It's about who, you know, when we look at it, there might only three of us who's worked in this arena, but we can put our hands on thousands of contacts and thousands of individuals who helped us shape this along the way. Loads more to do, Gabrielle. It's a really, really important point and well made.
Thank you. And thanks. Jen, have you just come off mute then? Did you want to say anything, or are you okay? Sorry. Lovely. Obviously we've got time for a little bit more of an open discussion now, and we can invite any of our previous speakers to come in on the next part of the discussion. I probably was thinking about we've talked a lot around the challenges and some of the constraints and some of the potential blocks to, you know, progressing or you know, really getting the energy up. And then Dave's given us that challenge, you know, just being positive, kind of getting stuck in, keeping going. You know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I wonder if our panel members, and including the ones before, might think about what they're thinking the opportunities are, some of the more positive things that are coming up that really quite excite them about what could really unlock some opportunities. And I'm happy to start, just so you've got a bit of time to think, and then obviously unmute yourself or put your hand up so we can take in discussion. But I'm aware through my, I guess, part of my own commitment to social value as I volunteer with a university. And I know that as part of that, there's a governmental discussion around whether the education sector, or particularly the university sector, comes into the public sector in more formal way in terms of within the whole of government accounts. And for me, I think the unlocking of the connection of the universities more formally into the public sector, and the fact that knowledge really it empowers people, it gives more rise to more social mobility. I'm not necessarily talking about degrees, I'm talking about, you know, T levels, I'm talking about just access to knowledge and education and further education and higher education, in reducing some of those. So I'm really excited to see how we can kind of really unlock what is already happening in our universities, our further education and higher educations. And we're at MIA talking a lot with City of Liverpool College, who we know reach into some of our most disadvantaged communities in Liverpool, around what we can do, even in a small way, around work experience, T-level work placements and things like that. So that's something I'm really excited about. I have actually seen a question in the chat as well, if anybody wants me to take that. I'm happy to take that. Or Donna, do you want to come in?
I was just going to respond to Gemma's question.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Gemma, do you want to come in? Just so I can hear your question.
Hi. Let me fix my camera. I'll try. Hi there. Yeah, I think it needs to be said very sensitively, and I try and put I would like to end with a positive note, but I think there can be a challenge trying to connect with people who perhaps have had not a very positive experience with health and care services, and how maybe sometimes they're the people we want to reach the most and they're hardest to reach. So that's one thing. And then I was trying to reflect on asking the right questions and thinking about, how do we let go of the science and the research and the evidence that tell us what might be best for people, and really listen to what they want? And that's a real challenge, because we have that famously misquoted quote saying, if you ask people what they wanted, they'd ask for faster horses, when really what they needed were cars, you know, that sort of implication. So it's how do we connect with those people that might feel forgotten or not part of the community, not acknowledged, not seen, and how do we ask the right questions and really listen to their answers, even if they're telling us something that doesn't necessarily go with the evidence. And I want to say it really sensitively, because I don't want it to sound like I'm saying, oh, well, the answer is stop trying. That's not at all the message I'm trying to give. But I'd love to hear from more experienced people here who've obviously, you know, done this far better than I have.
Shall I come in? So one of the things that the Health Creation Alliance champion is the iHab program, where it actually work with people who, exactly as you've described, who have experienced discrimination and trauma, and put the investment into developing those trusted relationships and use those connections to ask those questions. So I think sometimes in the public sector, we think we need to ask all the questions. So one of the first pieces of work I did in Oldham around employment was, rather than the hospital go into the local communities, when we looked at our data, we employed less people from the streets surrounding the hospital than we did in similar deprivation elsewhere in Oldham. So if you got a bus to the hospital, you got a job, but if you could walk to the hospital, you didn't. So we employed a local voluntary sector organisation to go and speak to those communities. And because it was a different person asking those questions, you get a different answer. So it wasn't the hospital going out. And what came back from that was, well, we see people drive in and drive out, so there isn't any jobs for us because you have to have a car. because that's what they saw. Now, that was in a completely different perspective than if we'd gone in and say, well, what qualifications have you got? Do you know what the jobs are? Here's low job descriptions, you know, come on. So I think to me, it is about, you have to create the conditions for those connections and pay as much attention to creating those conditions, and then ask the questions, or take the questions from the community to whom you're engaging, rather than walk in and say, today I want to talk to you about maternity services. Well, you're not there yet, if that helps. So on the link that I put earlier, but I'll put it in again, there's some links to some stories of how people have used that, and that might be a way in.
Thanks, Donna. Harja, I know I can see that you've had your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Yes, hi, sorry.
Hi.
I just wanted to add to you know, Gemma's kind of query, question, whatever you want to call it, just because of kind of my experience of working around communities and, you know, connections that I've made. And I just wanted to say that don't be too harsh on yourself. It is just about being human, and as long as you've got the key essence of engaging and that willingness to go out there and engage with communities, and building that trusted relationship. So you might want to connect with people that have already got those trusted relationship in an area that you might not have been before, to kind of almost guide you. But I always say, take your lanyard off, go to where people are, connect, and be human. So go and sit in laundrettes, go and stand outside school gates, just go where people are and literally just be human. And that is the biggest tip I give to, you know, everybody that I work with. And that's what it's all. And all I can say is that in doing that, it takes time to build those trusted relationships, and time is the key essence here, because I do a lot of work supporting public health commissioners to deliver better engagement and bring those voices of marginalized communities within, you know, commissioning. And I always say to them, how long have you got? And it's always, we haven't got much time, you know. And I say, no, absolutely, I'm sorry, but we're not going to do our usual type of engagement. You're not going to just have this pretty engagement, tick your boxes. We are absolutely going to engage with people that we've not heard from before, because otherwise, what's the point? You're never ever going to reduce any health inequalities, and it's just a tick box exercise, in my opinion, you know. So I would always say, trust relationships, be human, and it takes time to build that trust.
Thank you so much. Great advice there. Becky, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks, Gail.
Section.
I'll be quick, just conscious of time. But it's just to really, with Gemma's question, just to really echo what Donna and Hadra has just said. Hadra, sorry. It's with the voluntary sector, you know, the VCFSC, they're there, they've been there for years. They've got those relationships. They understand the communities, work with them, build the relationships with them, ask them to work with the communities to understand what's needed, and then build up the trust with the communities via them and then deliver, like listen to what they say and deliver on what's being needed. And I think that people just ignore the voluntary sector. We need to treat them with more respect, give them proper contracts, help them to support to the services to do what we need to do, because that's what's going to help the local communities, and that's going to release the pressure on the public services in the long run. So just to answer that with Gemma.
Thanks, Becky. Nicely rounded up. So as we wrap up today's masterclass, I really just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers, all the contributors, everybody who's participated in the chat for such an insightful and engaging morning. Thank you to the team for the Northwest Collaborative partners who helped with the back side of the session in terms of the arrangements and all the techie bits. So Sharon, Christina, Soha, Isha, Louise and Andrew. A reminder that all the video from today and the slides will be shared with everybody over the coming days in the link through your emails. And the feedback slide has been put in the feedback connection has been put into the chat. If you could contribute to that, would be great. That really helps us understand that the masterclasses are reaching the needs of you. We like to listen to you, as we've talked about today. Listening to people is really important. So tell us what more you need from this, and if it's more on this content, I'm sure that many of the speakers today will be happy to carry on this conversation. Let's keep the conversation going beyond today. Let's keep collaborating. Let's keep building those relationships. Let's keep challenging the old norms. Let's keep embedding what we're doing and seeking out those champions and those people as we are in our day-to-day work and through everything we do. Thank you so much for being part of today's session. I really do consider it a privilege to have been asked, and I really look forward to working with you all again. The next masterclass, I think, is probably on the next slide, which is around collaboration. which is a really nice segue from where we've just been today, what gets in the way and what you can do about it. So hopefully many of you will be on that again, and I hope to be on there as a participant this time and not a chair. But thank you all very much, and hope you have a great rest of the day wherever you are.